Okay. All right, let's get started. We are coming to the end of the year, and we've been studying Levis for almost a whole year, and I have found it very helpful, very exciting. And in January, we're going to start 3 new courses. No, I'm sorry. We're going to start 2 new courses. This course will continue, and then there will be 2 more courses. So, starting in January, we will have English for philosophy students. This black marker, I have to get rid of it. Which is an advanced literature-based course. And then we are going to have an intermediate English and a beginner. Okay, so 2 more courses. I'm telling you about this in case you have friends or family that would like to learn English. These 2 courses are going to be based on grammar and some literature, but easier. They will be good for people who have studied a little bit of English in school, but need help with pronunciation and listening, and also with just becoming more fluent in reading and writing, as well as listening and speaking. This course, English for philosophy students, that we have had all year with Levis, is going to continue. But we are going to make some improvements, some changes. And I would like to tell you about those changes now. We are going to finish with Levis in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because we only have to go a few more pages and then we're finished with the part that Olavo wanted us to read. After we finish with Levis in January, we're going to go to a new system. We are going to study short stories. Over the course of this year, I have spent many hours talking to Olavo. A lot of it talking about Levis, but also talking about everything, many things. And I've asked him several times. I've asked him, what must I do to create wisdom in my children who are young adults? My oldest is 22 years old. I said, what is the source of wisdom? How can I finish their education at home education? How can I educate them? What should I do? And Olavo always said the same thing. He said, wisdom comes from listening to the stories that people tell. He said people don't know how to tell a good story, but their life is full of good stories. And if you will listen to what people say about their lives, you will become wise. This is part of the living principle that we have been talking about all year. The repository of human knowledge and human wisdom that exists in the stories of mankind. He said, study stories. So, we are going to study stories. Now, another thing that went into the decision to go to short stories, I have been talking with some of the Brazilian students who are here, and they say they've been reading an author that talks about the fact that the most important study for a literary student are the stories of the Bible, because Western literature has been built upon the Bible and upon the Judeo-Christian tradition. And recently, I was speaking to a well-educated college student in America who was interested in philosophy and in religion, spiritual things. And she had many questions for me. And I said, well, you know, and I mentioned a story of the Bible. And she had never heard of it. So I said, well, have you heard of, and I mentioned the book in the Bible that it comes from. And she had not heard of it. And so I mentioned the fact that it was from the Bible. And of course, she had heard of the Bible. So in order to answer her question, I had to tell her, I had to speak for 20 minutes because she didn't know anything from personal study about the stories of the Bible. And this is a well-educated young woman in America. If you had asked her, do you know the stories of the Bible? She would have said, oh yes, I know them all. She thought she knew, but she didn't. And I suspect that there are many people like that, because there are lots of stories in the Bible that are not commonly known. And so we will study some of those. Also, we will study stories from a broad range of sources in order to get a wide range of human viewpoints. I myself am not qualified to teach the literary connections between these stories and the great stories of Western literature. Olavo could do that, but I can't do that. However, I can make sure you have experienced the primary source, the story itself. And when you go on to read the great works of Western literature in English, you will recognize the stories yourself. Also, from an English point of view, we are going to try to emphasize the speech in these stories. I will make an effort to choose stories that you can get in translation into Portuguese so that you know the content, so that we don't have to read the whole thing in class and talk about the whole thing. That will enable us to take a phrase and search into that phrase. How is it used by Americans? What are some other options for saying the same thing? By doing this, you will become familiar with literary conventions and literary language, and that will help you to be able to read other stories in English. So, we may not finish a given story deeply, but we will delve into the English of the story. And I will ask you to read the stories in advance wherever possible, so that you can send me emails telling me which phrases, which vocabulary words, which constructions are difficult for you, so that I will know what to talk about. We have a saying in English: you want to scratch where it itches. You want to scratch where it itches. That means, well, if you itch right here and someone helps you out by scratching here, it doesn't help. And in the same way, if you have a question about this word and I spend 10 minutes talking about this phrase, it won't help. So, I will want you to tell me where you itch, to tell me which phrase or which word or which construction makes you pause, so that I can prepare and bring a good explanation with extra examples. So all of this will begin in January, and I'm looking forward to it a lot. For the next 2 weeks, or 3 weeks maybe, for the next 3 weeks we will be studying finishing Levis. And then I also want to tell you, for the next 2 weeks, I am going to be out of town. So we will pre-record. So I will not be able to take questions. But I will be back in town by the end of December, and we'll have at least one last class in Levis to wrap it up. And then in January, we will move to the new approach, and we will have some short stories, some selected by Olavo, and some from the Bible, and some from just wherever we find short stories. So please send me your input. If you have anything you would like to study, any suggestions of stories that we ought to include or that you hope for, please send it to me in email, and we'll see if we can put them on the schedule. Okay, let us move on. Oh, also, don't forget to tell your friends and family if they want to have a lower level English course, grammar-based. That 2 courses will be starting also in January, and you can check the website. Okay, let's start with Levis. We're going to start at page 50 for reading and 51 for discussion. Okay, last week I ended in the middle of a paragraph. So this week I'm going to reread what we studied last week and then continue directly on with the end of the paragraph from last week. So let's get a running start by beginning with the paragraph, no proposed remedy, page 50. So I will read now. No proposed remedy answering to the analogy of a dam could be relevant to the actual disease. I need my pencil. America has long been menacing our future, and the complete triumph of Americanization there accelerates the progress of the disease in this country, where it originated, and would in any case have made a rapid and menacing advance. British capital and British know-how enabled America to develop a railroad network at great speed, and industrialism, a British invention, made inevitable the victory of the North in the Civil War. There is still, nevertheless, a difference. We have suffered no such abrupt opening of an impassable gap between the present and the past as was entailed in the swift formation of the new, immense, and supremely powerful country. It is not credible that America could save itself. The Ahnung, the memory, the faith, and the living intuitive faculty that must be appealed to in the initiation of the new kind of sustained creative effort can't be appealed to there. It isn't easy to complete the discrimination. I find it possible to say only that there are still the makings of an educated public to be rallied into one here, and some ghost or more of memory that might be turned into active sympathy with the kind of creative effort in which alone there could be hope. As for the good university, it would be misleading if I suggested that I base my belief that such an effort should be made on the expectation of finding that, or anything closely approaching, the good English school, which is an ideal. The multiplication of universities and numbers in the Robbins era would alone suffice to make belief so conditioned dismissible. Belief must be more humble and more bold. What I advocate is opportunism, the taking and making of opportunities. Opportunism inspired and informed by the living principle. By the way, I want to stop here and say that what we are doing right now is an example of the kind of opportunism Levis was putting his faith in. Everything Olavo does is an example of the opportunism that Levis put his faith in. This book was written before many of us were even born. And yet, here we are, studying and becoming educated. Humanity has not totally lost it in the generations after Levis. Humanity has continued, and we are taking advantage of opportunities to educate the remnant. And in homeschooling, the American people have seized the opportunity to educate the young. So this is an example of the opportunism, what we are doing right now. So keep that in mind. I'll begin with the sentence, what I advocate is opportunism. Page 51. What I advocate is opportunism, the taking and making of opportunities. Opportunism inspired and informed by the living principle. The living principle is what inspires us. From experience, I know that there are places where opportunities may be counted on, and I am sure that they could be made at many. To say this is to recognize that they will vary immensely in kind. Wherever there is a university teacher with the vocation and the courage that should go with it, the possibility exists. His initiatives are likely to enlist collaboration. I'm smiling because the collaboration is happening. Olavo is the teacher with initiative, and all of us are collaborating, especially those who teach. And collaboration covers a diversity of response and assistance. This is faith, but faith confirmed in experience. Faith on the part of Levis. I am now continuing with the part that we didn't do last week. So continuing in the middle of the paragraph. It may seem too easily said. I will add, then, that I know it may, and not without reason, and shift what is in any case called for, another mode of intimating the nature of my essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. The human need that our civilization thwarts will be, by some, at any university, so strongly felt that initiatives offering practical recognition of what it is and asks for would meet, even in the face of grave difficulties, the cooperative response. This, of course, would be from minorities, but it is in minorities that the living principle takes the creative initiative. And I am assuming in this book that not only are very small minorities worth enlisting and arming with informed and fully conscious purpose, but that if one doesn't believe that small minorities can initiate decisively, there is no hope for mankind. Okay, the first time I read that, it was incomprehensible to me. Completely. It said nothing to me. But I reread it and I got some sense out of it. So let's begin with the first sentence of the new section. It may seem too easily said. First we have to decide what it refers to. But even before that, I want to make you familiar with an English idiom. Sometimes you'll say something and someone will come back to you with the reply, "That's easy for you to say." That's easy for you to say. If I tell my student, my math student, that it's childishly easy to integrate this formula, they may say, "That's easy for you to say." Because I'm the teacher. It's supposed to be easy for me. If I say to someone, "Oh, that piece on the piano is easy," they may say, "That's easy for you to say," because I play the piano. Maybe that person would struggle. If I say to you, "English pronunciation isn't hard, it's easy," then you might say, "That's easy for you to say. You were born in America. You learned it as a baby. It's not so easy for the rest of us." Do you get the feel for "that's easy for you to say"? When a person makes a statement of opinion, their own opinion, as though that statement were a fact that should be agreed to by everyone, then the other people will say, "That's easy for you to say," because that's your reality. So, when Levis says, "It may seem too easily said," he's referring to this kind of a concept. It's easy for you to say. What Levis is saying, what does the "it" refer to? It is easy to say. What does the "it" refer to? Well, Levis is advocating opportunism. he is recommending to us that we seize opportunities, make opportunities where none exist. And he says, I know from experience that there are places where opportunities may be counted on, and I am sure they could be made at many. Well, Levis is saying that at your college, there should be opportunities for you to band together with other students or other teachers to educate students in a good way, according to the living principle. Well, you may say to Levis, that's easy for you to say. You have tenure at Oxford. But I will be fired from my job if I try to do this. So Levis is saying there are many places where you can find an opportunity to continue the education of humanity. And if there is no opportunity, you should make an opportunity. And Levis says, when you do this, it will enlist collaboration. Other people will join you and will help you, and it will form a movement. And you might say to Levis, that's easy for you to say. You are a published author. You have lecture halls filled with students who are listening to you. But I am just a lowly instructor with no published work, no influence, no clout. Clout means influence. No clout in the university. I don't think I can do it. So, if you say that's easy for you to say, you are saying, I don't think I can do it. Now, Levis tries to head off at the pass. Head off at the pass. Head off at the pass your objection. When you say, that's easy for you to say, I can't do it. He is trying to head this off at the pass. Now, what does it mean to head something off at the pass? This phrase comes from the Old West, the Wild West in America, with cowboys and Indians. And maybe there would be two mountains. Two mountains. And there would be a pass between the mountains, like a road. This is called a pass. Okay? And maybe the Indians are coming on horseback. I can't draw horses, but they're coming. And they're going to attack the cowboys. So the cowboys say, go head them off at the pass. That means the cowboys are going to be hiding behind that mountain, and as soon as the Indians come, they're going to push them aside and engage them in battle so that the Indians never get to the little town. Here's a town over here, a little town with vulnerable people. So the cowboys are going to head them off at the pass and deal with them. Okay, that's what headed off at the pass. It means cut off your opportunity. So, Levis is trying to head off at the pass your opportunity to say to him, that's easy for you to say. You can make opportunities at Oxford easily, but I can't make opportunities at my college or in my community because no one will listen to me. He is trying to prevent you from saying that by bringing it up himself and answering the objection. So when he says, it may seem too easily said, I will add, then, that I know that it may, and not without reason. He is basically saying, yes, it is easy for me to say that you can find opportunities. That is easy for me to say. We have another phrase. Talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. Talk is cheap means it is easy for me to say it, but it is hard for you to do it. It is costly and expensive for you to do what I can say for free. I can say it freely, but you have to make sacrifices in order to do it. So, when he says, it may seem too easily said, he is referring to this concept of how easy it is for us to make opportunities for educating others and for growing ourselves. And he says, I will add then that I know that it may. In other words, I know it's easy for me to say this, and talk is cheap. And not without reason. In other words, this is a concession statement. He's saying, you're right. It is easy for me to say, talk is cheap. So he gives in to you. He says, yes, you're right. And then he shifts the conversation to speak about another mode of intimating the nature of my essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. Okay, I want to call you back to page 50. Actually, page 49, bottom of the page. He says, it is perhaps, this is second to the last line, going into the last sentence. It is perhaps time to say once more that I haven't the sanguine expectation of one who sees himself as offering a sure prescription, or a prescription at all. The disease that threatens to destroy humanity is truly frightening. And one of the most frightening things is that no pointer to the only way in which we could begin the combat against it, no considered account in terms of the opportunistic tactics and principles they represent, will be widely recognized as that. Perhaps it is ceasing to be alleged, crudely and confidently, that F.R. Levis thinks that the world can be saved by literary criticism. And then, in the segment that we spoke of last week, he tried to correct the idea of what his real expectation for the salvation of humanity is. It is not that he hopes for a good university. It is that he hopes for a sustained creative effort. We learned that last week. In fact, when I came in, it was written on the board. A sustained creative effort is what he hopes for. So, now he is going to speak again to try another mode, another way, of intimating the nature of his essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. Okay, so again, now he is trying to clarify for us what it is he hopes for, what it is that he puts his faith in. It is not the finding of some good university hiding somewhere in England. It is something to do with a sustained creative effort. It is something to do with opportunism, with teachers taking on the challenge of fostering the living intuitive faculty in their students. And now we'll read on to see another way of looking at what he feels is the remedy for the disease troubling mankind. So continue reading. He says, I'm going to shift to another mode of intimating the nature of my essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. The human need that our civilization thwarts will be, by some at any university, so strongly felt that initiatives offering practical recognition of what it is and asks for would meet, even in the face of grave difficulties, the cooperative response. Very long sentence. I hate these long sentences because it's so hard to hold so many ideas in one sentence, one thought bite. But let's see what we can do. Okay, so remember our context. What is he putting his faith in? What does Levis hope for? Remember, first he hoped for a sustained, creative effort inspired by the living principle. He does not put faith in a university. So I'll say no hope for a good university. He advocates opportunism, which really means he has no concrete ideas. He wants us to come up with ideas and do them. Okay, so he advocates opportunism. And now, this new sentence. Oh, by the way, his hope is essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. This.
Can you change?
I already did.
Okay.
I'll get rid of the brown. Essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. Okay. He has a firm conviction that is essentially unsanguine. Unsanguine means it's kind of like, it's almost the reverse of hope. It means it's almost pessimistic. He is pessimistic. He doesn't expect the best, but he firmly hopes. Okay, in these things so far. Now we're moving into the next one. The human need that our civilization thwarts. I'm going to get the core of it. The human need. That's the subject. Skip that our civilization thwarts. Skip that. Will be. Well, let's read further. Will be by some at any university so strongly felt. Okay. The human need will be so strongly felt that initiatives offering practical recognition of what it is and asks for would meet that initiatives skip something even in the face of grave difficulties, the cooperative response. Okay. That initiatives will meet, skip something, the cooperative response. Okay, this is the core of the sentence. The human need will be so strongly felt that initiatives will meet the cooperative response. Now remember, he said he wanted sustained creative effort. Where will that come from? Well, it requires seers and educators to nurture this in young people and in others. And where are those educators going to come from? Well, there's no hope for a good university, so he is advocating that you and I and people of goodwill, inspired by the living principle, will make opportunities to offer the food for the soul and the food for the intellect that hungry people want and need. Intellectual food, spiritual food, philosophical food, educational food for growing minds and hearts and souls. When we offer that, his final hope that he's mentioning now is that the hunger will be so strong that initiatives, read opportunism, an initiative is something you start. You take the opportunity to start something. Initiatives will meet the cooperative response. So in other words, people will be so hungry for what we have to offer in the university or in society that they will cooperate as soon as they find someone who speaks their language. So, let's look into each of the things left out. The human need that our civilization thwarts. Okay, that our civilization thwarts. He's saying that the way education works in our civilization, the way the media works, the way capitalism with its commercialism works in our culture, all the cultural factors that undermine the growth of the soul and the growth of the mind, all of these things tend to work against this human need, this hunger. However, the hunger is still there, and this human need will be so strongly felt. Okay, let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Will be by some at any university. Will be right here. He says by some at any university. So I think he's hoping that at every university there will be opportunistic teachers, and there will be some at any university who will feel this need strongly. So strongly felt that initiatives, okay, now, offering practical recognition of what it is and asks for. Okay, this one talks about initiatives that will meet this need. They will meet this need. They will meet it in two ways. They will explain it and will answer it. So when it says offer recognition, practical recognition of what it is, students are hungry for something and they don't know what it is. So we need teachers and mentors like Olavo and like some of you who can say, what you are feeling is this hunger. And then tell them where to go to find food. You need to read these authors. You need to meditate in this way. You need to study in this way. Practical measures that will explain the need and answer the need. Providing resources for the people who have the need. Okay. Practical recognition of what it is and asks for would meet even in the face of grave difficulties. This one. Even in the face of grave difficulties. In the United States right now, conservative organizations and Christian organizations are sometimes shut down by the university, denied funding, and kicked off campus. There's discrimination against conservative ideas and against certain religious ideas in the universities of America. These are some of the grave difficulties. Other grave difficulties are students who are unprepared, students who are brainwashed toward bad philosophy, students who are unable to think. Grave difficulties. Another grave difficulty for me is that I was educated in a poor system. I don't know the great stories of literature, really. I don't know the great ideas of philosophy and of the Western tradition. I don't even know the subjects that I studied, which were mainly science, because it's been 30 years and I haven't used them. A grave difficulty is the unpreparedness of the students and the population. Another difficulty is the enticement of the world. I'm interested if you have any ideas of what the difficulties are of educating yourself and bringing along others. You can, if you are watching this on a tape, you could pause it right now and write me an email and tell me what you think are the difficulties that you must overcome in order to make opportunities to help in the salvation of mankind, according to Levis. Help by educating yourself, as well as by sharing this with other people. What are the difficulties that you face? Let's see. Okay, even in the face of grave difficulties, the human need will be so strongly felt that it will meet a cooperative response. In other words, you'll find somebody interested in what you have to offer. Okay, I'm going to reread that sentence now, putting it all together, beginning with the first sentence of this section that we are studying today. It may seem too easily said. I will add, then, that I know that it may, and not without reason, and shift to what is in any case called for, another mode of intimating the nature of my essentially unsanguine but firm conviction. The human need that our civilization thwarts will be, by some at any university, so strongly felt that initiatives offering practical recognition of what it is and asks for would meet, even in the face of grave difficulties, the cooperative response. Moving on in the paragraph. If you have any questions, send them in. But I'll move on until we get the questions, if there are any. Okay. This, of course, would be from minorities. But it is in minorities that the living principle takes the creative initiative. Let's stop there and do the first sentence. This, of course, would be from minorities. What does he mean by this? Well, it refers directly back to the cooperative response. So, minorities means only a few of the people who have been exposed to the message. Minorities. So, if you are in a university and you begin to talk about these ideas and you form a study group and you advertise this study group and there are 1,000 people in your university, maybe you will have 5 in your study group. A small number. That is a minority. You will never hope to influence the majority. The cooperation will come from only a few people, a minority of those you speak to. Most will not be interested. So, the cooperative response, of course, would be from minorities. By the way, in English, when you say minorities, it usually means someone who is an ethnic minority. Like in America, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant is the majority, so black people would be a minority, Hispanic would be a minority, Asian would be a minority, Jewish a minority, Arab minority. But in this case, he doesn't mean that. In this case, he just means less than half. Probably a lot less than half. Okay, so this, of course, would be from minorities, the cooperative response. But it is in minorities that the living principle takes the creative initiative. Remember in Conrad's The Secret Sharer? It was only the captain and the officer from the other ship that took the creative initiative to see that the right moral choice was to save the guy. The majority were just being influenced. The creative core of any group of people is always a minority. And then there's lots of people in the periphery, a few people in the creative center. So, while everyone may be a part of the living principle, the creative impulse is in only a few. The living principle takes its creative initiative through only a few. The creative writers, the artists, the philosophers. And I am assuming in this book that not only are very small minorities worth enlisting and arming with informed and fully conscious purpose, but that if one doesn't believe that small minorities can initiate decisively, there is no hope for mankind. So he says, I am assuming in this book, that means his entire argument, every argument he makes in this book, comes from the ground base assumption that if he reaches a minority, a few people, it is worthwhile, it is valuable. It is not important to reach everybody. A few is good enough. So, I am assuming in this book that not only are very small minorities worth enlisting, enlisting in the army means taking them in. He is looking for people to take into his army. Small minorities, not many. And arming with informed and fully conscious purpose. Information is power. He's talking about arming us with a information and conscious purpose. But that if one doesn't believe that small minorities can initiate decisively, there is no hope. Okay, he's got a construction here that you should notice. Not only, but not only this, but that. Not only am I going to pay for your education, but I'm also going to buy you a car. Not only am I going to allow you to take your test again, I am going to let you have it open book so that you can look up the answers. Not only am I going to cook dinner for you, but I am going to ask you what your favorite dishes are and be sure all of them are there. Do you see the pattern? Not only is this true, we put a truth there, but more extreme truth. And these two are usually related. This one is more extreme than this one. So, not only are very small minorities worth having and equipping, but if you don't believe that small minorities can initiate decisively, there is no hope for mankind. So you have to not only give a chance to small minorities because you can't get everybody, you have to believe that they can do the trick. They can initiate decisively. If you say, we will never change the world with a handful of scholars doing literary criticism, then there's no hope for mankind because you won't even try. You must not only try, but you must believe that your attempt will succeed. You must not only try to bring in people and equip them for the fight, but in addition, you must believe yourself that their effort is sufficient. I'm reminded of the fact that Jesus Christ came to a remote part of the world at a time when there was no media, no radio, no television, no movies, no telephone, no telegraph, no mass communication of any sort. And he kept himself secret, and he worked with 12 disciples for 3 years. And when he left, those 12 disciples turned the world upside down in one generation. with no mass communication, no media, no printing press, nothing to help. The truth is, one person can make a difference. Think about Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. He turned the tide in his country from violent revolution toward peaceful change. Think about Martin Luther King in the United States history. One small Baptist preacher who paved the way for the entire civil rights movement. So Levis says, if one doesn't believe that small minorities can initiate decisively, there is no hope for mankind. It is always true that the real leadership comes from a small minority. And we, as servants of God, and hopefully persons enlightened, should do our best in our small sphere of influence to nurture the living principle and to nurture true wisdom, true creativity in those around us. I think people have been doing it, and that is why we are here today, in spite of the fact that Levis was writing 50 years ago about the imminent destruction of intellectual mankind. So, homework. Write to me about what obstacles you face and about how you can make an opportunity to allow the living principle to express through your activities. So I'll write it on the board. Homework. What obstacles do you face in trying to make opportunities for the living principle? To express itself in your sphere. A sphere, it's like a globe, like the whole world. Your sphere is your circle of friends and acquaintances and family. It's your world. See if you can write me something and tell me what obstacles you must face to make opportunities. Now we'll have a break, and if you have any questions, please send them in. And if not, I'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll close the class. Okay, no questions, so we will see you next week. I will be pre-recording for next week and the following. But please send me some emails about this and I'll read it if you do. Make sure you send them by Thursday morning or even earlier to make sure it gets in the recording. So see you later. Bye.